welcome back to my channel. My name is Setson. Today, I want to introduce you to a Python project and package manager. It's called UV. If you're coming from JavaScript, you might be familiar with NPM, PNPM. There is also Yarn. In Python, you might be familiar with pip. All those are what we call package managers. We need to visit the documentation. So I want you to go into your browser, just type in UV Python. Like that. You're supposed to get a link right here. It's Astral. So I want to click on that. It will take me to this web page right here. So it's an extremely fast Python package and project manager. It's written in Rust. Let's look at how we can get started. Installing UV for macOS and Linux, just copy this right here. If you're on Windows, you have to use PowerShell. You can copy this. So I'm going to copy this because I'm on Windows. And then I'm going to go to search for PowerShell. Open Windows PowerShell. If you are in command prompt, you can just write PowerShell right here. And then that command will take you into PowerShell. So you know you're in PowerShell by this prefix here. It shows PS right here. Okay, so right here, I'm going to paste that command, Control V, and then you have to run this. I'm not going to do this because I already have UV installed on my computer. If you want to upgrade your UV, you can just copy this, and then you can paste that UV self-update, and then hit enter. It's going to check for updates, but in my case, I am already on the latest version. At the time of recording this video, it's version 0.9.27. You can confirm that UV has been successfully installed by running the command UV and hitting enter. You're supposed to see something like this. Now let's move on to the features. Important features. I'm not going to talk about Python versions. I'm assuming that you already have Python installed on your computer, but for some reason, if you don't, you can also use UV to install Python. You can just run UV Python install. We're going to move on to projects because that's what we want to look at. So this is a list of commands that we use when we are creating projects using UV. So creating and working on Python projects. So to create a project, we need to use UV in it. To add a dependency, we use UV add. To remove a dependency, use UV remove. To sync the project dependencies, so use UV sync. To create a log file for the project dependencies, we need to use UV log. To run a command in the project environment, we need to use UV run. To view the dependency tree for the project, UV tree. The only ones that we're not going to be using are these two down here. I'm assuming that you're already familiar with Python. I want to create a Django application. So by the way, Django is a web framework that is used to create web applications. By the way, you don't necessarily need to understand what Django is because we are learning UV right here. So let me go into my project folder. So I'm going to open my project folder where I want to create my Django application. So I already created this folder, but you can create this anywhere on your computer. I'm going to run PowerShell in the address bar right here. So if I hit enter, you see it opens in PowerShell. To create a project, let me go to working on projects. So here, click on working on projects. You can create a new Python project using UV init. We can do this, and then we specify the name of the project, and then we have to cd into that project. Or we can make a directory for our project, and then we cd into the project, and then we can initialize the UV project inside that directory. So either one of these can work. So I'm going to go with the first one. So I'm going to run UV init, and then the name of the project. In my case, I'm going to call it project 1. Hit enter, you can see how fast it is to initialize project 1. So if I ls now, you can see we have project 1. Let me cd. Let me clear first. Let me cd. Cd, by the way, means change directory into project 1. And now I'm inside project 1. I want to open this in a text editor so that we can analyze the files that are being created. So I'm going to run code space dot. It simply means open this directory in Visual Studio Code. Let me go ahead and open that. But you can open this in any text editor of your choice. We can see the files that have been generated by running that UV init. It says here UV will create the following files. So we have a git ignore, Python version, readme.md, main.py, pyproject tomo. Those are the exact files that we have, 5 files, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All of these files right here allow UV to manage your project. In addition to these files that have been created, UV will create a virtual environment and UV log. Right now, we don't have any UV log. You can manually create it by running UV log or UV sync or UV run. So let's look at each and every file that we have. Let's look at PyProject Tomo. So this one contains the metadata about our project. So let's look at this PyProject Tomo. Those who are familiar with JavaScript, this is similar to package.json. It has the name, the version, and if the project has dependencies, they'll be listed in this list right here. And then we have Python version. It contains the project's default Python version. You can look at it right here. This file tells UV which Python version to use when creating the project's virtual environment. We have a .venv, which is going to be our virtual environment. UVlog, it's a cross-platform log file. It will lock the exact versions of the dependencies that you're using. It's human readable, that is managed by you. Then if you want to manage dependencies, now we can go ahead and run UV add. So let's go back to the features. We already seen UV in it. Now want to add dependencies. We're going to be creating a Django project. So Django is one of those dependencies. It's an external package that is used to create web applications. I think my terminal right here is activating another virtual environment, which is something I need to deactivate. You don't need to do this step right here because I think I created another project using pipenv. So that's why it's behaving like that. If you cannot see this, you go to these dots right here, go terminal and then new terminal. Or you can come up here, you can click on this right here, it toggles the terminal. So you can run UV add, then the name of the dependency. This is a Django project, so we need that. So I'm going to run that. And look at what happens. It automatically creates a virtual environment, stores Django in that virtual environment. If you look at lib, you see Django installed here and its dependencies. And then we have a UV lock created. If you're working with JavaScript, this is similar to package lock.json. It locks all the dependencies. This file is important because if you want to reproduce the same project on a different machine, then UV will read into this file and then it will install those dependencies. Okay, so we have our Django installed. If you want to remove any dependency, of course, you can run UV remove. Let's say I want to remove that Django that I installed, UV remove Django. It's going to remove everything. If we go back to the dependencies, you can see there's nothing right here. Django has been removed and all its dependencies, but we don't want to do that. Of course, I'm going to run UV add Django. We still need it. Okay, so let me run that again. And of course, it's going to go ahead and install those dependencies back. After installing those dependencies, you can view the dependency tree for the project. So let's do that. That's another command. You can run UV tree. Right here, the main dependency is Django. It depends on this and this and this right here. Okay, I want to move on to sync. So to sync says sync the project dependencies with the environment. So I want to show you this. When we push this to a remote repository, it's not recommended that we push with the virtual environment. So what we push with the UV log. This UV log replaces our requirements.txt. For those who are familiar with the old way of doing things, usually when you push your Python projects, you have to create what we call requirements.txt with all the dependency version listed in that requirement.txt. And so that will allow us to reproduce that project. But we no longer need to do that because this UV log will take care of that. Let's say we delete this virtual environment right here. We don't have it, but we still have this UV log. All we have to do is we have to sync our project. So we can say UV sync right here. So it synchronizes everything. So if I run this command right here, you can see what happens. It recreates that virtual environment, installs all the dependencies that are required. UV log creates a log file for the project dependencies. We already have a UV log right here. But in case, let's say we did not, let me delete this. We can say UV log right here and then run that. Now we can have that created. If we open it, we can see it still has all those dependencies that we use for our project. For UV run, this is used to run scripts in our project. So when we created our project, UV created this main.py, which is the entry file, the main script of our project. But in this case, because we're creating a Django project, we don't necessarily need this main.py. So let me show you before I delete it. Of course, we don't need it. You can use UV run. You specify the file that you want to run. In our case, we want to run the main.py. If I run this, you can see it says hello project 1, which is this statement listed right here. But in our case, we don't necessarily need this because we're creating a Django project. So I'm going to do away with this file right here. So how do we then use the UV run? UV run, when we're creating a Django project, is quite easy. We can use UV run. And so Django comes with its own scripts, right, that you can use to create Django projects and manage Django projects. One of those is the Django admin, Django-admin. This is a command line tool that you can use in Django to manage Django projects. And so let me just run UV run Django-admin. And you can see it gives me options down here. But the one that I want is this start project because we want to create a Django project. So I'm going to do the same uv run Django-admin start project. It's one word like that. And of course, here there's an option to specify the name of the project that we want to create. So we want to create it inside project one. I'm going to call it new project. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it new project. Hit enter, and you can see now we have a new project inside our main project one. This is the default structure of a Django project. Inside the main folder, it creates another subfolder with the same name as the main folder. That's where you'll find the boilerplate code for Django right here. And alongside that, it's going to create a manage.py. So manage.py will replace Django-admin command. So this is a command line interface right here, similar to Django admin. So now if I want to run this project in the browser, I need to change directory. I now need to get into this new project. The reason why I had to seed into new project because I want to be on the same level as manage.py. So as you know, if you want to run, you can say uv run manage.py. We no longer need to run Django admin, and then we can run a server. And I want to specify a port number. I want to run it on 8001. By default, it runs on port 8000, but I just want to run it on a different port. So let me hit enter. Okay, so now it's running the server. You can see now it says starting development server, local hosts, port 8000. So if I click on that, then it will open. We have successfully installed Django, and you can see it says the install worked successfully. Congratulations! So you have successfully created a Django project. In my next tutorial, I'm going to be looking at the basics of Django. So I hope that was helpful. If you found the video helpful, leave a like, leave a comment. I hope to see you in my next tutorial. Now I'm out. Cheers.